You would be surprised how often I get asked about poo down in the comments section. Actually, no you wouldn't. You clicked on this thumbnail. You're just as curious as the next person. Hey, I'm Regan, and we're taking this 150-acre abandoned bush block in southern Queensland and building a homestead from the ground up. Everything from livestock to gardens, our tiny home, the whole deal. And that means we have to DIY pretty much everything ourselves. We're 100% off-grid, and we've got to figure out solutions for everything, including what we're going to do with all of our shit. Well, you pretty much saw us build this entire structure on another video, and if you haven't watched that one, there'll be a link here, down there somewhere. You can click on that and watch that video. And in that video, we briefly touched on the fact that we were going to be doing a compost toilet. Well, that was 4 months ago, and I thought we'd check in with you guys to let you know exactly how this system's going and what we're planning on doing with it next. Look, it's really simple. I don't need to show you a whole lot of details. It's a wooden box, it's a toilet seat, it's a bucket, and it's a bin full of wood chips. Actually, I will show you, because you're probably wondering, oh man, isn't that gross? Isn't that gonna like smell? Isn't it gonna look gross? Isn't it gonna freak people out? Well, no, come on, have a look. Okay, it's not what you're used to seeing at the bottom of a toilet, but it is just wood chips. Now, if I was game, I'd reach my hand in there and grab some, but I don't know how deep that is. Typically what happens is, once you've used it and kind of done your business, you'll grab 1, 2, 3 handfuls of wood chips. Our general philosophy is, cover it. I don't even want to see toilet paper, and we've got tons of wood chips. We're making so much mulch. Throw that down in there, and then that covers it up. We leave the lid off so there's a nice big airflow happening. Everything's going in there. I don't have a urine diverter. We're collecting absolutely everything from pretty much 4 people's regular use. It's all going in there, and I don't smell anything. So I've got a bin full of wood chips. We make those in our chipper. Handful of those. Straight down into the bucket. Okay, well here's where we have been putting the waste material from our compost toilet system. Now, it's really important to understand just how much human waste is actually in this pile. So first of all, it's collected in a 20-litre bucket. Now, by volume, we're probably putting about 70%, I'm going to guess, is wood chip mulch going into that bucket. So the rest is human waste. Then when it gets to here, we're mixing the material from that bucket 50-50 with straw. So we're adding straw, and that's kind of using that composting method of green material, brown material. So by volume, I want kind of 50-50 green and brown. I'm assuming that everything that I collect in the bucket is kind of infused, and so therefore I'm going to count that as a green material, whereas the straw is a brown material. Now, that means that the total amount of human waste in that pile is actually only about 10 to 15%. So that's great. But I'm concerned about leachate. So leachate is when you run water through any kind of a material, and then the water that you can collect out of the bottom of that with all of the soluble kind of materials that it's able to pick up, we call leachate. So an example of that would be a compost tea is sometimes actually a compost leachate. So you run a compost pile, you put a whole bunch of that compost into a barrel, you collect the water out of the bottom of that barrel, and what you get is a leachate. Now, if you're doing other things like adding an air bubbler and that sort of stuff, and you're actually kind of making an active system there, then that might be a compost tea. Same with worm tea or worm juice. If you've got a worm farm and you're collecting the water out of the bottom of that, more often than not, that's just leachate. So yes, it is picking up material from those worm castings or worm poo and all the other material in your worm farm, but it's not really an active kind of solution. It's not a tea, so to speak. So normally that's leachate. Now that's what leachate is. What we don't want is to create a leachate system with our human waste right here in our immediate environment. So we're on acres and acres and acres of space. There's no concern that we are causing an effect to any humans around us, but I've got to take care of the environment around us as well. We haven't had a whole lot of rain recently, but where my concern would be is that potentially this pile could leach waste into the immediate area, and then we've got E. coli and that kind of thing kind of spreading into the immediate area. That's why you've got to treat your septic waste responsibly and ethically. Now, I have seen these piles done where the idea is to just make a compost pile and first dish out the earth that you make it on. And yeah, sure, if you've got a hard clay earth, you're probably going some way to prevent that from happening. I still don't think that's sufficient enough, and that's why we're going to go with an IBC tank. I'm going to do my best not to show you anything really gross here, but actually I suspect there's not going to be a lot. We might find a I don't know, a toilet roll wrapper. But most of this has been here. So this pile we started at the beginning of October just as a test case to see whether or not the system was even going to work. So we never intended for this to be a permanent solution. We just wanted to kind of get the process happening and see if it works. I mean, I'd watched the YouTube videos. We were fairly certain it was going to. This pile here is probably around about 1/3 of a cubic meter of material by volume, and it's only about half of the waste material that we've collected in the last 4 months. So in the last 4 months, we've collected 20 buckets, and there's 10 buckets in here. So I've still got 10 buckets to process. We'll do that today. But remember, this is 10 buckets of material from the toilet and about 10 buckets by volume just of straw. So let's have a little dig in here, and I'm going to go right into the center. Do you know what? All I'm seeing is wood chips. I kind of suspected that because, to be honest, when I tip these buckets out, it's not as gross as you might think. You really don't see anything. I mean, if you've got a really weak constitution, you know, like if you're the kind of guy that vomited at changing his own kids' nappies, then, well, maybe homesteading is just not for you. But, but yeah, really. Okay, I'm digging down to kind of the beginning of that pile, and already some of that's starting to break down. Now, I'm not seeing a lot of material break down into fine material like I would hope to see in a typically active compost pile. And that's because, as I said, we haven't had a lot of rain here. And so this needs water in order for microbial life to exist in this pile and do the breakdown activity. So if I was to do a hot composting method of dealing with this, then I would need a lot more water in this system. And that also tells me I'm probably going to need to be able to add water to my IBC tank, because we're not just leaving this for years and years and years to break down over time. We're actually going to be adding worms to the system, and they're going to need water. But honestly, I can't smell this at all. You know what I haven't seen? I haven't seen toilet paper. I kind of expected that it would look a lot like this, because I'll be honest with you, over the last few months since we've been doing this, I've come out every now and then and had a little poke through the pile and had a look at kind of what's going on. I really expected to see toilet paper, and we throw the wrappers, they're just paper. We use Who Gives a Crap, so it's all natural. It's paper wrapped, it's cardboard packaged, and so the wrappers and the rolls go in here as well. So that's pretty, oh look, there we go, one bit of paper. And to be honest, it's barely recognizable as a piece of paper. That's pretty amazing. But hey, if you know compost, that's what happens. That's how, look, we are biological creatures living on a biologically fueled planet. These systems exist in nature for a reason. They're kind of designed to work this way, if you will. So when we take truckloads, sewer pipe loads of human excrement and pipe it to one single location and treat it in ponds, and look, I get it, we've got to do things on scale when we've got humans all living in close proximity to each other. Not everybody's got the space to work something out. But it does make you wonder if we're doing it the best way possible. Like, if I can do this from a compost toilet that I built in a small area, and it's going to be even smaller now and contained, you've got to wonder how much more healthy we would be as a species if we took the time to not taboo and sanitize ourselves from some of this stuff. Look at that. This beetle here, he is happy as, and that is a good sign of something healthy going on. So these are IBC tanks, and if you've watched any kind of homesteading DIY videos on YouTube, you've definitely come across these before. They are super versatile and handy for a multitude of projects. In our scenario, we were able to get 4 of them and use them for our drinking water supply when we first got started. And that got us through the first few months until we were able to install our 50,000 litres worth of water storage, and you can check that out in another video as well. So I've got these 4 IBC tanks just sitting here like an eyesore, and IBC tanks tanks are super helpful on a homestead. I'm starting to think through a few different projects we might do with these. One is we might build a proper septic water treatment system, and you can do that with 2 or 3 IBC tanks. So maybe I'll just kind of set 2 or 3 of those aside for something like that. I don't need that right now. We're not making a ton of waste water on the property that we can't use in other ways. So another might be for rainwater storage. I've got a few spots on the farm where I might use one down near the greenhouse so that I've got rainwater on hand for when we're doing seedlings. So I've got to get one of these unhooked. It's not quite empty. I think there's still a bit of water in it, so hopefully I can tip it up, tip all the water out of it. And that's the outdoor shower and toilet over there behind me. So I'm gonna see if I can just manhandle it and drag it over there. So when you buy these IBC tanks, they come with a valve. I think it's just around the corner there, and it's set right down low in a way that it can drain every last bit of liquid out of the container. The problem is that valve doesn't have like a standard fitting to get you to be able to attach threaded fittings to it. Now there's an adapter you can buy, and it's about $30. And so actually what you should just do is buy one of these tank adapters. They're about $7 from the hardware store, and then you can put them wherever you want. So most of them I've kind of put one at the bottom. Some of them I've put them at the top where I wanted to kind of like fill or create like an air vent. So heaps more versatile and a lot cheaper. That's just a little tip for you. Here's how this works. So this is the latest bucket. That's the oldest bucket. I've got about 8 buckets here. I'm probably not going to need this many buckets in the future because we're setting up the system right behind the toilet building, the outdoor toilet there. And so really the only reason I've been doing this is because it's a little bit of a hike up into the bush where we've been kind of testing this whole system out. And so I was loading these buckets up on the trailer of the ride-on lawnmower. Probably don't need to do that in the future, so 3 or 4 buckets is probably going to be more than enough. And realistically, I want to be processing these straight away. And the reason for that is I've got airtight lids on these at the moment. There's a lot of moisture content in here, and there's a lot of bad bacteria in here already because of what's in here, obviously. The downside to an airtight container with compost material is you're only going to get anaerobic composting. That means composting with microbes that are processing material without the use of oxygen. And so essentially the only microbes and pathogens and bacteria that do that are usually your bad and harmful ones, but moot point, there's already bad and harmful ones in here. What we really want is for an aerobic composting process to take over this process and to kind of overthrow those ruling anaerobic microbes and basically take the process over and kind of own that entire composting system, which would happen if we were doing hot composting. So you really don't want to be doing composting worms and hot composting at the same time, because what's going to happen is the middle of your pile is going to cook really hot, like 60, 70 degrees. And those worms, they don't want those temperatures. They want a nice, even, cool, shady temperature with just the right amount of moisture in it. And the worms are going to be doing all the work for us. All right, start loading it. All I'm smelling is like you would expect to smell if you took up a big, huge handful of dry wood chips or straw, which is literally, I mean, I know it's 80%, 90% of the material that's in here, so that makes sense. But you would expect that if there was any kind of funkiness going on, the human nose is pretty good and adapted to telling you that there's danger, and I'm not smelling the danger. All right, let's add some fresh material. This we might need to get ready with the pixel effect. We'll see. I'm hesitant to tip it towards the camera, like, honestly. When I do this on the regular basis, I'm going to be facing this way. I'm holding the bottom of the bucket, the lid's come off, and that was the closest I got to the material that's in there. And I'm going to be tipping this way and, holding my breath for a second usually. Oh, there we go. Like I said, there's liquid in here. We didn't divert the liquid. All right, I'm tipping it towards the camera. If it's gross, I'll blur it out. Well, it's certainly sloppy. Ooh, there's a lot of bug life in there. I'm getting a little bit of, honestly, wet wood chip smell. Oh, we've got some on the top. All right, we're gonna have to just kind of brush this down because I don't want this stuff going out onto the ground around it. It's not even, I would kind of expect a high ammonia smell. A little bit, maybe? All right, let's answer a question that you might be thinking. Am I planning on using this material in the gardens ever? I learned a lot of this, what we're setting up today, from a few really good videos. There's a Kiwi couple that are kind of living off-grid, and they do this humanure system, and they make reference to the book, I think it's called Humanure, and I think the author is Joseph Jevons. Oh man, I hope I got that right. If I didn't, I'm going to put it, here on the screen and a link down below as well. They use this material in their gardens within 6 months, but they are not doing worm composting or vermicompost. They are doing hot compost. So they know once it's been through that hot composting system, there is not a single shred of nasties in there at all. And so they are using it on their gardens. Number one, I'm not that confident with the process yet. Maybe within a few years I would be. Number two, we're doing vermicompost, not hot composting. And number three, I want to also add in a little bit of extra insurance by adding time into it. So we might do a 2-year system here. I really feel like we'll get to 2 years on one of these IBC tanks. If a third of a year has got me about half full, and if you've worked with compost before, you know that's going to break down, add to it, break down, add to it. So I think I'll get at least 18 months in here. And I've got other IBC tanks we could add to it if we wanted to. After 18 months, I'd probably get all this material out, get it tested the first time. I'd want to know for sure. And even then, I'm probably not game enough to put it directly on my garden beds, especially where I'm going to be growing any root vegetables or any close to the ground vegetables, lettuces, spinach, that sort of thing. Maybe I would start to use it on climbing vegetables, beans, tomatoes, or up high vegetables, corn, eggplant. But realistically, I'm probably going to use it in our orchard to begin with. So we're talking about a vermicompost that's going to take, a matter of months to break it down. It's probably safe after that. Then we're going to do time to allow it to break down even further, and the elements to allow it to break down even further. Then we're going to test it to see if it really is safe, and then we're not even going to use it on our direct contact vegetables. So I think that's a really safe approach the first time around. I don't really know what I'm doing. I've watched and studied this enough that I feel confident enough to have a go with it, and I understand the principles, and I definitely understand composting, but I think this is a good way to approach these kinds of projects when you're learning, and that's a large part of what homesteading is. Have a go, learn, be willing to make mistakes, be willing to accept input, criticism, feedback, and be willing to test your hypotheses. Okay, this is the straw we'll use, and this is great. We'll just kind of do it right from here. Perfect. It's going to serve two functions. It's going to soak up any of the excess moisture that we've got in there, and it's going to begin to add a real balance to that green-brown ratio that you want to keep when composting. And so this is definitely our carbonaceous or brown material being added to our nitrogen-heavy or green material, which is funny because the green material is brown and yellow. No, well, it's all wood chips, so brown. Don't get hung up on the colours. Just learn how to categorize the contents. Okay, that's pretty good. Let's mix it a bit. Whoa, that one was slushy. Yeah, already I think I need to cut this lid a bit bigger because look, every time I'm doing this, I'm getting spillage. In case you're wondering, we do wash the buckets before reusing them, and then we sanitize them with, actually it's a food grade sanitizer that we're using. Other than the moment that I pour that in there, and like I said, some of those buckets are weeks, if not a couple of months old. So they've had a chance to really kind of accumulate some nasty activity in them. But other than that moment that I pour it in there, as I'm doing this with the straw, this smell is completely dissipating. All right, I think you are now the poo fork. I'll get another compost fork for the gardens. I reckon the majority of what we experience today, and lucky for you, this isn't smell-o-vision, because yeah, it was a bit on the nose, I'm not gonna lie. But like I said, that's just never going to be part of the process. We'll finish with a bucket, it'll come immediately into here, it'll get a topping of straw. That's $12. I've used half of it for 20 weeks. So one $12 bale of straw is probably gonna do the year, to be honest. All right, this week's bucket. A little bit, yeah. If I stand here long enough and inhale deeply, you're just not gonna be doing that. And besides, look, you're gonna get over your humanure phobias the more you do these kind of activities, and maybe it's just not for you. But honestly, my main consideration is not, does it smell? Is it a smelly job? I mean, far out. Wait till we've got pigs and cows and other livestock. There's going to be equally as smelly jobs. Just for some reason, and look, I guess over time, evolutionarily speaking, we've kind of developed this healthy respect for the smell of our own waste material for good reason. But if I can understand the principles of staying safe, I'm like literally right now, I'm leaning on the metal part of this bar because I was aware every time I tip those buckets in, and I'm going to review the footage and make sure, but I thought about this, if I put the lip of the bucket here, I'm never going to have to think twice about leaning on here when I'm doing the forking and that sort of thing. So it's little things like that. Be sensible, you know, we're not out here to be total ferals. Be mindful, understand the process that you're engaging with and where the dangers are. I wasn't even going to include this clip because I feel like washing your hands and hand sanitizer and all of that should be fairly obvious with this activity, but I know what their comment section is like, so. All right, just before I add in the star of the show, the main characters that are going to make all of this happen for us, can I take a minute just to tell you about our Patreon page? If you haven't heard me talk about this before, and I don't talk about it a lot, or maybe you haven't seen a lot of our videos, we do have a Patreon page, and there really are two main reasons that we do it. And the first is, I'm going to be totally upfront with you, it's because we want to give people an opportunity to get behind this project and support it financially. So we are super grateful to those of you who have jumped on board and already become members on that page and are supporting what we're doing out here. And here they are right here. These guys are epic. And because of them, and you know, if you want to jump on and support us too, because of that contribution, we're going to be able to take the goals, the projects, the dreams that we have for this 150 acres of very broken, barren, neglected landscape and really breathe some life into it and regeneration into it. We're not just building a homestead and kind of like a hobby farm for ourselves. We really see this as a project that is greater than ourselves, that benefits the land that we're on, the community that we're a part of, and the broader community that you're a part of as well. And so look, we could do that on our own, but those of you who have got behind us and supported us have meant that we've been able to accelerate some of those projects even already. We know that YouTube is going to be a large part of how we fund this project, and so yes, we will make some money from the YouTube Partner Program and through like sponsorships and that, but realistically, and we've seen a little bit of that come in already, that's only ever going to be a very small portion of what we need to spend on this project. There is earthworks and machinery and council and approvals and a whole array of things that need to happen over the next few years, and so if you are able to or want to get behind what we're doing, and we are so thankful for those of you who do, then that's one way you can support us. The other reason you might want to jump on our Patreon page, and there's a couple of different levels of membership. You don't have to jump in at that super fan level. We appreciate it if you do, but even at the base level, what we're offering in return is a bit more of an insight into what we're doing out here. So a lot of behind the scenes content. So yeah, we do this video every weekend, and then very soon we'll launch a podcast. And so at some point there's going to be at least 2 videos a week that we just kind of make freely available through YouTube. But the majority of the rest of the content that we want to produce is going to be for those of you who are keen to get involved and become part of the, I guess, the closer inner community of what we're doing. And so at the moment we're releasing like some behind the scenes content. Anytime we're doing any kind of plans or tech drawings or maps or any of that sort of stuff, that's all going to go up there. It's where some of the ongoing conversation happens. And so if you would like to be a part of that, like just seeing what we're up to day on the homestead and really diving into some of these projects that we're engaging with and how they're progressing, then, you know, jumping in at that base level on Patreon, that's another way that you could do that. All right. Let me introduce you to the main characters. These are our compost worms. I bought these from Bunnings, that's like Lowe's. This is a starter pack. It's about $50, and then you can get like a booster pack for $30. They recommend you start with at least a starter pack. It's gonna have approximately 1,000 worms in there. You can't just dig up worms from your garden. They're gonna be earthworms. They're not gonna be the same as these. These are gonna be probably tiger worms. Yeah, look at them. Oh, that. All right. They're in a medium there that's keeping them really happy. There's going to be a ton of, you know what, I'm going to open this up and I'll bring you over and have a look. There's going to be a ton of eggs, adult worms. Oh, look at that. There's little baby ones. I can see them wriggling in there. That is so super cool. And then these, oh, I don't want to hurt you. These are our main tiger worms. So they're often called red wrigglers. There are so many in here. They're all hustling to get away from the light right now. So let me bring you over real quick. Check these guys out. All right, if I just do a little kind of a flick, they're all gonna be in there wriggling around. I don't know if you can see that, but right there, just above my finger, those tiny little white threads there, they're all baby worms. So we've got worms at all various stages. I'm gonna start them out all sort of together in one space. They will probably disperse pretty quickly. They're gonna be seeking out food, they're gonna be seeking out moisture, they're gonna be seeking out darkness, and they're gonna be seeking out the right temperature. So hopefully somewhere in this, 1,000 liters or 1 cubic meter of space, they are going to find the exact right ideal conditions. I read up the other night that you can use these red wrigglers or composting worms to process animal manure. So there are people that literally have a compost worm farm, one of those towers, like little boxes. You can DIY them yourself out of buckets just for the dog poops on their lawn. So I am not at all worried about what they're going to encounter down in here. I want to make sure I don't miss any of you. Well, that's it, guys. I am pretty happy that we have got a very safe and very ethically responsible system for dealing with our septic waste here on the homestead. Well, actually, it's a shame to even call it septic waste. I mean, definitely what I was putting in from those buckets, you would. Septic means harmful microorganisms. What's going to be going on in that IBC tank there over the next few days and weeks is definitely, septic's not a right description. Let's say humanure. I like that word. And so I'll keep you updated with how this goes, and when we get to close to full and we're going to need to add another one on, I'm sure you'd be interested to know just how long this lasts and how effective it is at breaking the material down. We'll monitor it really closely, and like I said, we'll do some tests throughout the process to make sure that we're doing it right, and we'll especially be monitoring that colony of worms to make sure they're staying healthy and active. But for now, I think that's going to do it. Hey, don't forget to head on over to our Patreon page if you want to keep up with what we're doing here on the homestead during the week, or otherwise we'll see you next weekend.